Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, for some time, I did promise this build guide a few weeks ago, and I am keeping to that commitment. So, I've finally managed to get some time to string together my Soulwrest build guide. Now, this one, I'm currently on Cyrus A9, or Awakener 9, which comes from the new Maven tree Ascendencies. Now, I have done Cyrus A9 with this build. It does it incredibly easily, actually. Though not necessarily deathless, it's a pretty crazy fight, but it does do Cyrus A9, essentially all other content in the game, and maps like a beast. It farms, you can do Uber Elder like a beast. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but I'll get into the mechanic now and we'll flesh this out a little more. And you'll see the structure in the description of how we'll tackle this video. So anyway, how does this build work? Well, essentially, Soulwrest is a single item build. You can gear it any other way, except you need two things, a 6-link chest and the Soulwrest. And as you can see there, that's my Arena Master, which I'm going to do a video on how to get those. That's incredibly easy, but we'll get into that when we get into the mechanics. So, everything circulates around using the Soulwrest as a Might Staff. And the reason why is it has a built-in mechanic called trigger level 20 Phantasm skills when you consume a corpse. Now, do you need to 6-link this item? Now, a bit more understanding to that. That trigger skill then feeds off the jewels that you actually put in the actual stave itself. So you don't need to 6-link anything in the stave, because once you socket it into the stave, or the staff, however you want to call it, it then latches onto the trigger level 20 summon Phantasm, so essentially creating a technical 7-link. Now the only thing you need to then do is figure out, okay, well, how do you get minions, how do you trigger, how do you consume a corpse? Well, really simple solution, and that comes into our 6-link here. So we run a Cyclone cast while channel setup in our chest, and we run Flesh Offering and Desecrate as the two key skills in here. And what will happen when you Cyclone around, you'll drop Desecrate, Flesh Offering will consume those corpses, and then that will then chain onto your staff, and then you'll have, if you've got a level 21 Soulwrest gem, 21 little Phantasm minions running around. Now, mine book up at a DPS level of about 442,000 per minion, which if we have a look at that from a calculation standpoint, just these minions alone, 941.1 times 21, we're looking at 9.3 million DPS just for the Soulwrest minions, not including any other minions, the Carrying Golem. The Animate Guardian does no damage, but we'll talk about the purpose of why we have that very shortly. And yeah, so just as a starting point, we're looking at close to 10 million DPS with this build on a relatively low budget. You really don't need anything special. I guess we'll talk about gearing, but off the back of this, to sustain mana output, we're looking at having the Devouring Diadem, which at the start of the league is expensive, but now is dirt cheap. The Soulwrest is dirt cheap. The only real expensive item in this build is the chest piece that I'm using, but quite frankly, you can use any 6-link chest piece as long as it gives you the, bridges the gap on your resistances and gives you a fair bit of life, because this is a life-based build. You can get it with blind for enemies in your vicinity, and that's the ideal role, but incredibly expensive and not necessarily really worth it. Things like the Jinx Juju is like 1 chaos. The rings I'm using are actually not even really heavily optimized rings. They're quite basic. We're going to use the Darkness Enthroned because that gives us a lot of minion buffing ability in here. And this build uses the Stampede as well. I promised that I would use the Stampede. Someone made a comment a little while ago, and it uses the Stampede so that you always have that consistent 150% movement speed, so your clear speed, and this affects Cyclone. This is why Cyclone is so quick on this build, because if we were to take this off, essentially we would slow the whole build down. The real investment here, and we'll do a separate section about this, is in the cluster jewels. It's actually quite pertinent to get the right cluster jewels in this one, and that can have a bit of a cost, but we'll talk about that a little later in the video. Anyway, So let's get into this video, and that's the basic mechanics. So let's take a walk through the different areas of the build and break it down, and yeah, let's go from there. Okay, so for armor and primary gearing, the first thing that we're going to be looking at using is going to be the good old faithful astral plate. Now with this, if you have a look at my PoE, you'll notice I've basically went for maximum life, cold resist, lightning resist, aura resist, basically any other stats that you can buff up and build that defensive layering. You're going to want to focus here. The next item you're going to want to run is going to be the triad grip. Now for this one, you'll need all green sockets. In particular, with the build that we're running here, all green sockets will increase cold damage, and that's basically how we want to approach our damage output, is having our specters do cold damage. Now the next item that you'll see will be the devouring item. Now for this one, it basically means that it converts your energy shield to your mana pool, so that way you can fully reserve your mana using auras. And it also gives you 20% reduced mana reservation, which is why we stack our auras in the devouring item. It also gives you the ability to have flesh offering, which is going to further cast your phantasms as you roll. Now the next item is the stampede, and what this basically does is it means that your movement speed never goes below 150% of its base value. The other thing is that you can also apply an anoint. In this case I'm using diamond skin, but you can use whatever else you want to do, whatever you want to use with this. Now for the belt, we're using the darkness enthroned. The reason why is you can have 2 abyssal jewels in this, and you get a 75% increase to effect with those jewels. So you're basically going to want to stack minion damage from recent minion skills being cast, and also life and resistances to buff yourself up further. Okay, so the biggie here is going to be the Soulwrest. This is pretty much the heart of this entire build. This basically means that you can have the level 20 trigger Phantasm skill built into your build when you basically cyclone. Now, the other thing that you should note about this is you don't need to 6-link this, you can leave it as it is. You will need 5 blue sockets and 1 green socket, which can be a bit of a pain in the royal ass to get, but once you get it, it's going to be pretty dope. You're going to be doing some crazy damage, and you'll basically be able to flatline any boss in the game, which makes PoE a lot more fun. Okay, so for jewelry, I'm just running 2 unset rings. Now you could run Vinvasex, but unset rings are fine. You're just going to focus on life and resistances and any other attributes to fill the rest of your build. Now the other key item you'll need is the Jinx Juju Amulet. Now what this will do is it's going to give you chaos resist. It's also going to mean that 10% of the damage that you take is going to be reallocated to your Spectre's life pool, and this is one of the many defensive layers that you'll be building into this build, because we don't use guard skills in this build, but we do use bone offering, and we'll talk about that when we look at the tree. With this, you'll want to anoint Ravenous Horde. Okay, so for jewels, very simple. You're going to be running Ghastly Eyes in your belt, and you're going to want to have increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently, life resistances, and just flat minion damage. The other one that you'll want to put in is the Fortress Covenant. This is going to give you up to 40% increased minion damage. It's just overall a really good minion buffing jewel to have in your build. Outside of this, we'll talk about clusters when we look at the tree. Okay, so in your helm, you're going to want to run Zealotry, Hatred, Summon, Skitterbots, and Generosity. In the chest, Cyclone, Cast while Channeling, or the Awaken version, Flesh Offering, Desecrate, Frostbomb, and Fortify. For your boots, you'll run Raise Spectre, Feeding Frenzy, Animate Guardian, and Minion Life. In your Soulwrest Weapon 1, you're going to run Elemental Focus, Signal Prey, Hypothermia, Controlled Destruction, and Minion Damage. For the gloves, you got to run Dash, Second Wind, Sniper's Mark, and Phase Run. For the first ring, you'll run Carrion Golem, ideally a level 21, and for the second ring, Convocation. For your Spectre Minions you'll be running Host Chieftains to generate power charges. You'll get this from Act 7 in the Ashen Fields. Same with Carnage Chieftains to generate Frenzy charges for your Phantasms. And the Arena Master, which gives you, I think, a 20% attack speed boost for minions, and you can get these from Warlord influenced maps, and I'll do a video about that separately, but or you can go into the open channel and ask to see if somebody can give you this Spectre. It's another option. Okay, so for the actual tree that you're going to be running in this circumstance, basically we'll be starting from the Witch Ascendancy. Go figure, it's a Necromancer. And you'll come up, you'll pick up these nodes up into this intelligence cluster here, intelligence node here. Then you'll come to the right, pick up Heart and Soul, grab your Lord of the Dead, important for early leveling, and then come up and grab Cruel Preparation. Now, from this point, you'll run to the left, you'll pick up Enduring Bond. We'll want to come down now. We won't get Elemental Equilibrium straight away. There's not a lot of point until we get our Avatar of Fire. But from this point, you'll come up. If you need the Dexterity, ping this point here. Come up and grab your Death Attunement. Now, you can pick this up early, but you'll probably pick this up later in the piece to build into your clusters, and we'll talk about this last, because this will be the last thing that you do. Now, you'll come to the left, you'll pick up Avatar of Fire. Now, the way that this build works is essentially it recognizes that you're converting all damage to fire, but then by using Elemental Equilibrium, which you'll get after you get Avatar of Fire, it'll then increase the resistance of enemies damage taken to fire damage, but then using the triad gloves and having 4 sockets as green, converting all damage to cold from minions, that will then hit or reconvert from fire to cold damage. So you'll expose enemies and increase enemy resistance to fire, but then enemies cop a 50% reduction to their resistances to cold, and that's because of the triad grip gloves, and that's why we use those particular gloves for anyone who wanted to understand that a little bit more. So then you'll come down, you'll pick up Purity of Flesh, you'll pick up Sovereignty because we want to buff up our auras. You'll come down, pick up Righteous Army, Redemption. Now, you can get this cluster node, not necessarily pertinent in the early days of this build, but you can. And then Devotion, and you can get Whirling Barrier early, or you can avoid getting that right now and get it when you get up into the high 90s and when you're getting the level 95. So then you'll come back, you'll come back to this node where we started. Sorry, this node where we started. Or here, sorry. Then you'll come to the left, you'll pick up Sacrifice, Spirit and Spiritual Command. This is going to increase your minion attack speed and damage, and this is going to increase the survivability of your minions. In particular, we don't want that Animate Guardian dying. And then you'll come down, pick up Discipline and Training, Sanctity. You definitely want Grave Pact. You'll pick up this node in here and apply another Abyss Jewel. Now, you could sub this out for another jewel, entirely up to you. I should also note that up in this area too, this is where we're going to see our Fortress Covenant, because one of the disadvantages is if we were to have a notable that we allocate in the range of Fortress Covenant, it actually increases damage to minions by 20%. So you want to seat this, and now it doesn't apply to these large notables, but it applies to these smaller notables. So when you have it in this area, there's no notable in here that will actually result in a 20% damage increase to minions, which is why we seated here. So anyway, as we come back down, we'll get our jewel socket here and now apply a minion jewel. It really depends on what you want to roll. You can put anything here. If you need resist, do that. Corrupted blood immunity, whatnot, go crazy. Then you'll come down and pick up the full health cluster here because we want to get to 5k health ideally. Then we'll continue down, we'll get Heart of the Warrior and Warrior's Blood. Now this diamond skin is coming from the Anoint on the Stampede, and obviously Ravenous Horde up here is coming from the amulet. Now, cluster jewels. And this will be in the POB. So ideally you want a triple cluster, 8 socket jewel, and if you can get a 9 large cluster jewel, then do that. This one is optimum, but you'll need Call of Slaughter, and that'll basically mean minions created recently, and that's the biggest thing, minions created recently, because you're always going to be creating minions with this and replacing minions. they will get a 30% increased movement speed buff and increased attack and cast speed at 10%, and that's critical for the Phantasms to do their thing. Then you'll get Feasting Fiends. This is going to give your minions leech. You don't really need this for the Phantasms, but it does give survivability to your Carrion Golem and potentially your Animate Guardian. You'll get Renewal. This is going to result in double damage while minions are at full life, and based on what we're about to discuss, your minions for your Phantasms will generally be at full life when they're spawned for a short period of time and they become invulnerable. And that feeds out actually from Blessed Rebirth, which you'll need this node. This basically means that minions created recently cannot be damaged, and they have 20% increased maximum life, which means as you constantly recycle your Phantasms, they are immortal. So you can just keep sicking them after bosses using Signal Prey, and basically just keep slamming them on bosses all day long, which is why they're so powerful. The other thing you'll be running is Life from Death. So every time your minions die, and this is a defensive layer built into this build, you will get increased life regeneration per minion that has died recently, and that's also accounting for minions that you recycle and recast. And minions recover 4% life on minion death, so that buffs up your Animate Guardian and your Spectres as well, and then that then cycles into the defensive layer with your Jinx Juju Amulet, which then means 10% of your damage taken to Spectres, taken to you is then repurposed to your Spectres. So it's a bit of a life loop going on to keep your Spectres alive, but then keep you alive as well, which is why this build can actually take a fair crack of damage without having too much physical resistances and things like that. And then I've got Feast of Flesh as well, and this just means as you are cycloning, you're actually getting 10 life by every enemy hit by attacks, plus 8% life. It's just a really useful small cluster jewel to put in here. Now, I do also have Replenishing Presence, which is pretty much a given on any minion build. Gives you aura increased effect, and it also gives 1% life regeneration, and again we want to keep Animate Guardian alive because it's worth like 4x. And then Vengeful Commander, and also I should note I'll link the Animate Guardian video that I put up a little while ago because it's the same Animate Guardian I use in that video. And Vengeful Commander will buff up Hatred, which we use to buff up our cold damage. And then I'm running just a simple Surging Vitality just for a little bit extra beefiness for the character, as well as that every 4 seconds you get 10% of your life over 1 second regenerated, so it just gives you that huge survivability buff. Now for Ascendencies, we're going to always pick up Commander of Darkness first. This is going to increase your resistances and your minion damage. Then you'll pick up Mindless Aggression. This is going to give you increased minion damage again. And then we'll pick up Bone Barrier. And the way that we want to run Bone Barrier is we'll have Bone Barrier as our where you would normally have your movement button as your left click, you'll map that to Bone Barrier. So every time you click around the screen, it constantly procs Bone Barrier. So you always have Bone Barrier up for you and your minions. And please feel free to put a comment in the description if you have a question about that, and I'll explain that a little bit better if that doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's essentially the crux of the understanding there. The other thing that will run on this is Plaguebringer, and the reason why is we're always going to have corpses near us, and it means that enemies will deal 10% reduced damage to us, and it also means that you get 30% increased area of effect for minions, and also your allies or minions get increased damage based on corpses near you. And because we're casting off of corpses, we're always going to have them up. It's always going to buff all of your Phantasms in that way, shape and form. But yeah, that's essentially the tree as a whole and the ascendancies associated with the tree. Alright, so I hope this build guide sort of put some clarity to how to run Soulwrest. By all means, feel free to post comments in the description, in the comments section of the video below. Now, there's plenty of other ways that you could go about rebuilding this build and making it better. I've gotten this up to close to 500,000 DPS per Phantasm. I'm pretty happy with this build across the board. It's incredibly well optimized at this stage, works amazingly. It's cheap to get up and running early league, and this is, the endpoint that you can get it to without too much investment at the end of the day. But anyway, if this video helps, give me a like, give me a sub. If you think it's shit, hit me with a dislike and slay me in the comments, as I know you will. And until next time, bye.